Welcome to Next Level Leadership. Today, we're exploring a game-changing concept, vulnerability in leadership. Now, before you raise an eyebrow, let me ask, what if being vulnerable could make you a stronger, more trusted, and more inspiring leader? According to Gallup, leaders who display vulnerability see a 50% increase in employee engagement. That's massive. In this guide, we'll explore how vulnerability drives trust, fosters innovation, and creates workplaces where people thrive. Stay with me as we dive into powerful examples, real-life strategies, and actionable insights to harness the transformative power of vulnerability in leadership. Understanding vulnerability in leadership. Let's start with a key question. What does vulnerability in leadership really mean? Vulnerability isn't about oversharing or losing control. It's about the courage to show your authentic self, your strengths, your struggles, and your humanity. This willingness to be open creates a powerful ripple effect within teams. When leaders acknowledge their imperfections and admit they don't have all the answers, they build trust and foster connection. Imagine working under a leader who says, "I made a mistake, and here's what I've learned." Wouldn't that make you feel safer to take risks and grow? The problem with avoiding vulnerability. So why do so many leaders avoid vulnerability? The biggest misconception is that vulnerability equals weakness. This belief is so ingrained that leaders fear admitting mistakes will undermine their authority. But let's think about the opposite. When leaders avoid vulnerability, they create a culture where no one feels safe to admit mistakes or share bold ideas. Picture this. A team member has a groundbreaking idea but keeps quiet, worried about being judged. That's the cost of avoiding vulnerability. Missed opportunities for growth and innovation. Imagine a CEO who never admits when they're wrong. Their team begins to mirror this behavior, and soon, mistakes are swept under the rug instead of addressed. The result? A stagnant, disconnected culture. The power of vulnerability, real-life stories. Now let's flip the script. What happens when leaders embrace vulnerability? Take Howard Schultz, the former CEO of Starbucks. Schultz frequently shared personal stories from his upbringing to the challenges he faced as a leader. This openness made him relatable and fostered loyalty among his employees. Another example is Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft. Nadella transformed Microsoft's rigid, competitive culture into one built on empathy and collaboration. How? By promoting vulnerability, encouraging his team to speak up, admit mistakes, and share ideas. The result? A wave of innovation that led to unprecedented growth. Building trust through vulnerability. Vulnerability and trust go hand in hand. When leaders show vulnerability, they build trust by demonstrating authenticity. For instance, admitting a mistake shows you're human and accountable. This encourages your team to trust you and follow your lead. When trust is present, teams communicate better, collaborate more effectively, and perform at higher levels. Tips for building trust. Be honest. Share your challenges and how you're addressing them. Admit mistakes. Show your team that it's okay to fail and learn. Invite feedback. Create a culture where input is valued and acted upon. Trust is the foundation of every great team, and vulnerability is the bridge that gets you there. Creating psychological safety. Let's talk about a powerful concept, psychological safety. This is the belief that you can take risks, make mistakes, and speak your mind without fear of punishment. Leaders play a critical role in creating psychological safety. By being vulnerable, sharing their own uncertainties, and encouraging open communication, they set the tone for the entire organization. When Satya Nadella became Microsoft's CEO, he emphasized empathy and listening. His approach created a safe space for employees to share their ideas, leading to innovations like Azure's cloud services. Fostering innovation through vulnerability. Innovation thrives in environments where vulnerability is encouraged. Why? Because taking risks and sharing new ideas require courage. When leaders show vulnerability, they normalize the idea that failure is a stepping stone to success. This mindset inspires teams to experiment, learn, and innovate, overcoming challenges to vulnerability. Let's be real, embracing vulnerability isn't easy. Fear of judgment, resistance from others, and personal insecurities can hold us back. But here's the good news. These challenges can be overcome with practice and intention. Start small. Share a lesson you've learned or ask for input on a decision. Over time, vulnerability becomes a natural and powerful part of your leadership. Tips for starting small. Share a personal story about a challenge you overcame. Admit when you don't know something, then invite collaboration to find the answer. Practice active listening to create space for others to be vulnerable too. The role of empathy in vulnerability. Empathy and vulnerability are two sides of the same coin. When leaders practice empathy, they create a space where vulnerability is welcomed and respected. Empathy means listening without judgment, understanding others' perspectives, and responding with compassion. When leaders model this behavior, it encourages their teams to open up, share ideas, and build deeper connections. A leader who listens to a team member's concerns about workload and works collaboratively to find a solution demonstrates empathy. This act not only solves the immediate issue, but also builds trust and strengthens the relationship. Practical strategies to cultivate vulnerability. Let's get practical. How can you develop vulnerability as a leadership skill? Here are some actionable steps. Self-awareness. Reflect on your strengths and areas for growth. Understanding yourself is the first step to being open with others. Share your journey. Use storytelling to connect with your team. Share lessons from your experiences, including the challenges you've faced. Admit mistakes. When you make a mistake, own it. Show your team that failure is a natural part of growth. Seek feedback. Ask your team for honest feedback. When they see you're open to their input, they'll feel more comfortable being vulnerable themselves. Lead by example. Demonstrate the behaviors you want to see in your team. When you're authentic, your team will follow suit. Real-life stories of vulnerability in action. Let's hear some real-life examples of leaders who've embraced vulnerability and the impact it's had on their teams. A manager who admitted their own challenges with remote work and used it as an opportunity to support their team's struggles. A teacher who openly discussed their journey with failure, inspiring students to approach learning with resilience. A startup founder who shared their story of burnout, leading to an organizational shift toward prioritizing mental health. The role of vulnerability in driving team engagement. Team engagement is one of the most critical factors in any organization's success, and vulnerability plays a key role in fostering it. When leaders are vulnerable, they create an environment where employees feel seen, heard, and valued. Think about it. If your leader openly shares their challenges and seeks input, wouldn't you feel more motivated to contribute? Vulnerability breaks down hierarchical barriers and promotes collaboration. A leader who shares how they overcame self-doubt in their career journey inspires their team to believe in their own potential. This openness not only boosts morale, but also strengthens team loyalty. Overcoming resistance to vulnerability. Let's address a common concern. What if showing vulnerability meets resistance? This is a legitimate fear, especially in competitive or traditional workplace cultures. But here's the truth. Resistance often comes from misunderstanding. Some may see vulnerability as a weakness because they've never experienced its transformative power. As a leader, it's your role to redefine vulnerability as a strength. Strategies to overcome resistance. Start with small wins. Share a manageable personal story or admit a minor mistake to show your team it's safe to be open. Educate your team. Talk about the benefits of vulnerability in building trust, fostering innovation, and improving collaboration. Demonstrate consistency. When your actions align with your words, resistance fades over time. Consistency builds credibility. Create safe spaces. Encourage open dialogue in team meetings and ensure all voices are respected. Developing vulnerability as a leadership skill. Now let's talk about how to develop vulnerability as a leadership skill. Like any skill, it requires practice, self-awareness, and intentional effort. Step 1. Practice self-awareness. Self-awareness is the foundation of vulnerability. Spend time reflecting on your values, strengths, and areas for growth. Journaling, mindfulness, or even seeking feedback from trusted peers can help. Step 2. Start with your inner circle. Begin by sharing your vulnerabilities with those you trust, such as close colleagues or mentors. This builds your confidence and helps you practice expressing yourself openly. Step 3. Use storytelling. Stories are a powerful way to connect with others. Share a personal story that highlights a challenge you've overcome or a lesson you've learned. This makes you relatable and approachable. Step 4. Seek feedback regularly. Ask your team for honest feedback about your leadership. Be open to their insights, even if they're uncomfortable to hear. This shows that you value their opinions and are willing to grow. Step 5. Embrace imperfections. No one is perfect. Acknowledging your imperfections doesn't diminish your authority. It enhances your relatability. Celebrate progress over perfection. Vulnerability and innovation. Let's dive deeper into the connection between vulnerability and innovation. Innovation thrives in an environment where people feel safe to take risks, share unconventional ideas, and learn from failure. By being vulnerable, leaders model this mindset. They show their teams that it's okay to try, fail, and try again. Example: a tech company embraced vulnerability by hosting failure roundtables, where employees and leaders shared their biggest professional mistakes and what they learned from them. This practice not only normalized failure but also led to groundbreaking ideas and improvements. If you want your team to innovate, start by creating a culture where vulnerability and risk-taking are encouraged. The link between vulnerability and empathy. Empathy and vulnerability are deeply interconnected. When leaders are vulnerable, they're better able to understand and relate to their team members. For instance, a leader who admits to feeling overwhelmed during a challenging project is more likely to notice when their team members are experiencing the same. This empathy builds stronger connections and creates a supportive work environment. Tips for cultivating empathy. Active listening. Pay attention to what your team members are saying and what they're not saying. Ask open-ended questions. Encourage team members to share their perspectives without fear of judgment. Express gratitude. Acknowledge and appreciate your team's contributions, big and small. Building a culture of vulnerability. True transformation happens when vulnerability becomes part of your organization's culture. Here's how to make it happen. Lead by example. Your actions set the tone. Be the first to share, admit mistakes, and celebrate learning moments. Recognize and reward openness. Celebrate team members who show vulnerability, whether it's admitting an error or sharing a bold idea. Create structured opportunities. Host team-building activities or open forums where employees can share their thoughts and challenges. Train managers. Equip middle managers with the tools to foster vulnerability within their teams. Real-life success stories. Let's hear some inspiring examples of how vulnerability has transformed organizations. A healthcare CEO who openly shared their struggles with work-life balance, inspiring a company-wide focus on employee well-being. A nonprofit director who admitted they didn't have all the answers during a crisis, which empowered their team to step up and innovate solutions. A small business owner who openly discussed financial challenges with their team, leading to collaborative ideas that turned the business around. These stories prove that vulnerability isn't just a personal trait, it's a leadership superpower that drives real results. The long-term impact of vulnerability. Let's look at the bigger picture. What's the long-term impact of vulnerability in leadership? Stronger teams. Vulnerability fosters trust and connection, which leads to more cohesive, high-performing teams. Sustainable growth. A culture of openness encourages continuous learning and adaptation, setting the stage for long-term success. Increased employee engagement. When employees feel safe to be themselves, they're more invested in their work and the organization's mission. Vulnerability doesn't just impact individual leaders, it transforms entire organizations. Final takeaways: embracing vulnerability. We've covered a lot today, from the misconceptions about vulnerability to its profound impact on trust, innovation, and team engagement. Here are the key takeaways. Vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a courageous and powerful leadership tool. By embracing vulnerability, you build trust, foster psychological safety, and create a culture of innovation. Developing vulnerability requires self-awareness, empathy, and consistent effort, but the rewards are worth it. So, what's your next step? Start small. Share a personal story, admit a mistake, or seek feedback from your team. Take one step toward vulnerability today and watch how it transforms your leadership journey. Thank you for joining us on Next Level Leadership. If you found this guide helpful, give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue to grow, lead with authenticity, and create workplaces where everyone thrives. See you next time.